if you really want to make an impact in how much more balanced your hormones are, you have to start to look at all the stressful areas of your life. And finances can be one of those. If you are feeling overwhelmed with your finances or just stuck, or it's making you wake up and grind away at night, this episode is for you. Tune in to learn what your next best step is to have strong finances no matter where you are at in midlife, how to choose a financial advisor, and how much money you may want to have saved before investing. Let's dive in.
What's up, sister? Welcome back to the Period Whisperer podcast, the show helping perimenopause and menopause women de-stress your body and decode what it's saying to you so you can own your own health, energy, and weight loss again. If you're new, I'm so happy you're here. I'm Bria. I'm your host, a recovering people pleaser and hustle addict turned functional and holistic hormone specialist. Let's lean in and learn what your body is saying to you.
Hey there, sister. I'm so grateful that you are joining me for this episode of the Period Whisperer podcast. It is one of our expert interviews, and I have a wonderful guest on here for you who is so knowledgeable, so able to help us feel comfortable in an uncomfortable conversation. With the most significant contributor to hormonal imbalance and perimenopause symptoms being stress and chronically elevated cortisol, addressing all areas of stress in our lives becomes the most effective strategy to improving how we feel and navigating this difficult time. Knowing that I really wanted to have a discussion on finances and money here on the podcast. I know that I've been in a position in my life before where when I am woken up with these elevated cortisol levels and my mind starts grinding, finances have been one of those things that's keeping me awake, that I'm recognizing maybe I was worried about at that time. And interestingly enough, statistically speaking, women need to feel 80% confident in order to make a decision versus men who only need to feel 40% confident. This stat absolutely impacts how women take charge of their finances. So, what builds confidence? Education, knowledge, and action. I'm so excited to introduce you to Christa Szalach, who is a financial advisor with Northwestern Mutual. And she helps so many of her clients, especially women, take that next step, no matter where you're at. And I will tell you from personal experience, she makes you feel so comfortable, even in the most uncomfortable situations. What I want is for you to listen to this podcast and recognize that whether you're in debt, whether you don't feel like you have enough savings, whether you have these things and you just haven't invested and you don't know what to do to really feel secure in your future, that this is going to be a very powerful episode for you. And I want you to take the notes, listen to it time and again, share it with your girlfriends so that we can become more empowered as women and less stressed in this area. Okay. Let's meet Christa. I'm so excited for you to hear all of the awesome stuff that she has to share. Hey there, sisters. Welcome back to the Period Whisperer podcast. I am so excited about our expert guest today, Christa Szalach, who is an amazing financial advisor, someone that I have worked with and know well. And you already heard her bio, but I thought what a perfect time of year for this discussion to come into play, to start talking about, really feeling empowered around our finances, what we can do next steps, since we know that stress, which can come from finances, really impacts us in these hormonally shifting years. So Christa, thank you so much for being here. I'm just really grateful that you're taking the time.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I always like to start with you, and really what are your philosophies, I guess, around personal finances as a woman and financial advisor? What do you, tell us where you're coming from.
I always like to start with with drawing out a picture. When we think about finances, I feel like it can be this really overwhelming thing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that goes into finances. Like our health goes into finances, right? Where we live is our financial picture. How much money we earn, literally on our paycheck.
Yeah.
And so when we think about financial planning philosophies, I like to kind of dumb it down, if you will, and literally think about building a financial plan like building a house.
Yeah.
So if someone was going to build build their dream house, right? They're probably going to pick out a plot of land. They're going to find a construction team or maybe an architect. And then when that team is ready and they're like, okay, this is the house we want to build, they're going to start with a foundation, right? They're going to dig a hole in the ground. And then they're going to lay the cement and they're going to have a really strong base. So that supports the walls and supports the roof. And in a financial plan, that foundation literally is some defense, blocking and tackling. It's the risk. How do we mitigate things that could go wrong and might derail us from putting those beautiful countertops, the beautiful roof onto our house? Sometimes that's literally thinking like, hey, if I'm maybe married or have kids or a mortgage or any debt on the balance sheet, if I pass away tomorrow, do I actually have the right amount of insurance to cover that or to leave behind? Maybe it's, what if I get sick or injured? I don't die, but I don't have income anymore. How do I make sure I replace that, right? Because our income allows us to build that plan. There's a few other things that go into that, but then we move into the walls of the house. So when you think about building that structure, that's probably the next place they're going to go after the foundation. And the walls of a financial planning house are literally 20 to 40 years of just building wealth, depending on how long someone works for. How do we save for goals tomorrow? How do we save for retirement? Making sure that we're planning not just for the cash savings tomorrow, but also what about the things 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And then also a 40 to 50 year retirement, depending on when someone retires. Which leads us to the final philosophy of the roof, right? We put that final structure on, and the roof is distribution. So when someone does retire, okay, now we have to touch the money. What's the game plan? Right? You think about like hiking. I always love to give this analogy. There's a stat about people who hike Mount Everest. Most of the injuries actually do not happen on the way up, right? We're focused. Where do we step? What route are we taking? Our legs might be fresher. Where most of the injuries happen is on the way down. Same concept in retirement, right? Saving the money is not always that hard, right? It's like, okay, I use my 401k. All right, I put it into an investment account. But when it comes time to touching it, what do I do? How do I touch it? What's the strategy? What are the taxes? And so that's where we then step in and help clients with, okay, you did it. You got to retirement. How do we strategically touch this? So that house philosophy is what I like to kind of dumb it down again, if you will, of think about building a financial plan.
I love that. First of all, that's an amazing analogy. And I love it so much. Like I've always actually thought of our health very similarly. It's like we all get very excited about, the finishings, like you said, those countertops and even, how to spend the money, but like how, in health, it's like we always get really excited about the results on the scale or how the body is physically changing on the outside. But that only gets to happen if the foundation is laid appropriately. So what an awesome analogy. And it almost feels like as a financial advisor, you guys are that architect or are that project manager or that advisor around like bringing it all together and just, giving those bumpers and guidelines and support. Does that seem right?
Yeah.
Do I have it?
I think you're spot on. I sometimes will use the phrase like, we're the CEO of your financial picture, right? So we're going to help you in all these different areas. And that's kind of a CEO's role, right? Of maybe it's delegating some things. Like, I'm not going to do your taxes. I am not an accountant. I pay an accountant. But I know your taxes are important, so we need to get you to the right person. Or, hey, I can't use your work 401k plan for you, but I can advise you on, hey, we need to be doing this, and here's the tax implication or the amount we need to defer, those things. So really, I feel like as a financial advisor, you're just that, like you said, architect, if you will, kind of building the plan and then helping clients execute and take action. And I'd say 80-90% we can actually do for clients, but there are some things where we don't touch, but we refer it out.
Yeah, I love that. That's so awesome. So when we're getting into, because I think, I think any woman listening right now recognizes the discomfort around finances that there can be, the fear of like not knowing things, and even just not acting or not wanting to even look at it, money mindset stuff. Like there's so many pieces that can go into, but I think it can be obviously very empowering to be on top of it. But if we know finances can be either a huge stress or a huge strength in our entire life, which of course is going to impact our health. And like you said, our health will impact our finances for sure. What are some stats about women and finances that you think are important?
Yeah. So I had some of those prepared. I have a feeling you might ask. And one of the first stats that I just think is crazy to me is that Gen X women believe that they need to have $2.1 million saved for retirement. And so that's their belief, right? Like if you just go and ask a Gen Xer, how much do you need? They're like, okay, about 2.1. But the average Gen X woman that's about to retire has less than half of that saved, has about $980,000 saved.
Wow.
So talk about the disconnect, right? To live the life they want to live. And you think about retirement with medicine, technology, we're living longer.
Yeah.
So we're about to retire and maybe we need money that lasts us 40 years and we believe 2.1 million is that number.
Yeah.
But now you're going into retirement with only 980 grand to your name. Stressful.
Yeah.
Right? Really stressful and probably mathematically doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I think that comes back to a lack of education. 25% of women say they have less than 1 times their annual income saved.
Mm-hmm.
So 1 times less.
Yeah.
That's significant. And then there was a stat here. Where was the one? Okay. 36% of women say they know how much money they need saved for retirement. So they feel confident. They feel like they have a plan. 36% of women. But for men, that number jumps to 52%.
Oh, no way.
That's a big difference. Yes.
Yeah.
So talk about confidence when it comes to money and women's lack of confidence or just education around it. And now I think there's some gender bias, right? Like men think, well, they're like, I know how to do everything. Do you? So that's part of that is like they probably just feel overconfident, and maybe that's why it's 52%. But I do think it's a big part of our society. And when you look at history, right, go back to the 1900s, women stayed at home, women took care of children, and they didn't handle that. And so I do think our society is playing some catch up, but only, like I said, 36% of women feel confident. And so we have a lot of work to do to kind of bridge that gap, especially as more women are, single or not going into marriages, even if it's, or I guess there are some divorce breakups, but there's also just more and more women not entering into a relationship. So they need that confidence and they need a plan as well.
Yeah. Yeah. They need to understand it more so that they can make the right decisions so that they can set themselves up for success. I love that. That's really helpful to hear. And, I feel like there's so much info out there these days, anytime you're scrolling, like even if you settle once on like some financial advice, obviously the algorithm shoves these things out there. So there's so much info out there for financial help, but I feel like that, like, where to start or that first best step is really going to vary depending on where you're at with your finances. I think we were talking even before we were recording, like in midlife, which is everyone is listening to this right now. This is a time where maybe things are very stable, but it's also a time where health issues can arise. It's also a time when divorces can arise. It's also a time when kids are, getting ready to go off to college. So like there's a lot of big financial things happening at this time, which is probably what brings on that stress. But so for a woman listening, wanting to take that next step and build strength in her finances, but let's say she is in debt, where would you say she start? What is that like first step, that she could even do on her own right now to begin with?
Yeah. So first, what I would tell people is there's a common misconception that working with a financial advisor costs a ton of money. And I think that's just something truly my industry has failed at, because the way our industry is perceived, people think, oh, I can't afford that, therefore I don't get help. I don't deserve that. So a lot of times there are actually non-fee-based advisors where you can go have conversations, even get advice, and you haven't paid a dime. Now, that's the advisors that are working to build trust to actually gain the right to be your advisor. Of course, in the end, they do get compensation and hopefully they disclose that to you. But to answer your question, I'd say first, start by seeking help. Second, I do agree with coming back to the foundation of that financial planning house. Debt reduction is part of that. Now, strategic debt reduction. There is such thing as good debt out there. And a lot of times when I tell clients, they're like, whoa, debt can be okay. Yeah, some debt is, right? Like your mortgages, your student loans, your car loans. Those are what we call strategic debts on the balance sheet. And we don't actually stress about them. We don't rush to pay those off. Now, if we start to get into some credit card debts,
Yeah.
personal loans sometimes around 15+% interest. Credit cards typically 20 to 30%, call it 25% interest.
Yeah.
Now we're in a backwards hole, right? That interest is growing faster than we can even pay principal payments. So for those individuals, I would say think about, there's two methods, an avalanche or a snowball method. And I personally, mathematically, am a fan of avalanche. What that means is you lay out all, let's just say credit cards. If someone has 5 and they, have 28%, 25%, 22, 21, 20, right? They list them in the order of percentage.
Yeah.
Avalanche means we're going to pay the minimum on 4 of them, and we're going to put as much extra as we can to the highest percentage.
Right. To get
whatever card has that, all of our extra money goes towards that. And then we pay that off. Great. Now we have 4 cards left. Same concept. Minimum on 3 of them, all the extra to that 4th.
Right.
Mathematically, that is the best way and quickest way to pay off a debt.
Right.
Here's the catch. Emotionally, it's going to feel like poop. It takes longer. So when you think about emotional wins, right? We're human. Everyone likes to have little wins. So emotionally, the snowball method, think about literally rolling a snowball. The more snow you roll, it gets bigger and bigger. Concept is you start with the smallest debt, no matter what the interest is. So if you owe $500 versus 5,000 on a card, I'm starting with the 500. And I'm putting all my extra towards that. And then the minimum's on the other. That one will feel better, right? Because you're going to have quicker wins, right? You're paying a smaller debt versus potentially a larger one. But mathematically, the way to save the most money and be most strategic is the avalanche method.
It's avalanche. That's so interesting. And, I love that you brought up those are great tips. Thank you. But I love that you brought up to seek help, because I definitely was someone under that impression that there's no point in reaching out to a financial advisor until you have a whole bunch of money to invest. It was that's really just was the belief that I had. So you're right that is out there and what people think. But you're saying even for someone in credit card debt or, non-strategic debt, we'll call it, that's what you called it, right? The strategic debt, right? Yeah. Even when someone who has debt that's not strategic debt, it is valuable to reach out for support and help and guidance first.
Yeah, I think so. And look, after a conversation, a professional will kind of tell you, hey, keep doing what you're doing. Focus on that top priority. Or they might say, you know what, when I look at your budget and your surplus, yeah, maybe 80%, 75% needs to keep going to this, but let's put together a plan. And now we need to divert 25% here, whatever that may be. And so that's where I think seeking out professional help. I do always like to clarify here, professional help means holding the right licenses and or credentials, because I know you talked about it earlier, right? There's a lot of noise on social media. Most of those people are not licensed professionals, but so find someone to at least have a conversation with, and then they can give you guidance on best path forward from there.
That's important. What are, when we're looking for a licensed professional, what is the certification we're asking for?
Yeah.
Or, what do we need?
Yeah. So when I think about a holistic financial advisor, it is someone who is licensed to help you with insurance and investment needs. When you think about a financial plan, they all go into that. And so if people have taken, and that's at least 4 exams, potentially more, that they've studied for, taken, and passed, which makes them credentials to handle your investments and handle your insurance, not just one or the other. Yeah. In our industry, the kind of golden standard, if you will, is Certified Financial Planner, CFP. So this is now a designation. So they have all those licenses I just said, and then they've also sat through, about 7 equivalent, it might even be 8 equivalent college courses where they went through a course, studied, took an exam, passed, and moved on. And then at the end, they sat for a very, very extensive exam. I think it's about a 6-hour, one-day exam, to then show, yes, I learned all that knowledge, I went through it, and now I have this designation behind my name. Do you have to be a CFP to be, well-diversed and do great planning? No, but I think it's a great designation. And, truthfully, I'm working towards it. So I don't have that designation right now. It's very rigorous to achieve, but I think if someone does have that, that shows they have all the necessary licenses and they've went through much, much more rigorous training to actually be knowledgeable in our industry.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's really, really helpful for us to know because again, I think people can call themselves a lot of things. I mean, I work in the health industry, health and wellness industry. And
Yep.
so we can, there's a lot of things we can call ourselves without any specific certifications or a lot of things that people do. And having those does make a difference in many ways. So thank you for outlining that.
Sure.
Okay, so first, for someone who's like in non-strategic debt, especially credit card debt, we want to seek help, of course, and guidance. But one next step strategy might be using either the avalanche or the snowball method to start to get yourself out of debt.
Mhm.
What about for the woman who is not in debt, but maybe doesn't have this, year or however, like how much savings do you recommend people have put away? And I guess that's going to depend on the person, but is there kind of a no matter what, or like, should definitely aim to this before we invest? Is there anything like that?
So it, like you said, definitely going to differ based on who I'm working with, but general rule of thumb, and this actually comes from the Certified Financial Planning Committee. So that same designation I was just saying, kind of that golden standard in our industry, they recommend that clients have anywhere from 3 to 6 months of lifestyle expenses saved up.
Mhm.
3 to 6 months. So let's just say someone lives a lifestyle of, I don't know, 10 grand a month, just to make it easy math. Well,
Yeah.
3 months would mean you have just 30 grand of cash in
Yeah.
a savings account, checking savings account. 6 months, 60 grand.
Yeah.
So probably 30 to 60, and that's just emergency fund. Now we enter the conversation of, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, what else do you want to see happen financially in the next 1 to 2 years? So that's your savings. And then how much more cash do we need on top of that, right? If you tell me you want to buy a house in 6 months and we need $80,000 for a down payment, okay, well, we need that 3 to 6 months plus 80
Yeah.
grand. And so that's where it really starts to vary on who are we working with? What are their goals? What's your risk tolerance, right? Like some of my clients are like, hey, you know what? I feel really confident if I lost my job in my industry, within 3 months, I'd find another one. So 3 months of cash is good. Other people, they might want at least 6, up to 12. It really just depends on their comfort level and risk tolerance.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of things to think about. You don't even realize, but you're right. This is where people really vary, don't they? Is like in that
Mhm.
risk tolerance. And how much of that do you think comes down also to this whole concept of money mindset, of how we're raised around money, what our expectations and experiences growing up? Is it big?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Great question, Bria. Yes. The way we are raised shapes us. One of my favorite questions to ask people is, how do you feel about debt? And then just stop, right? Like, how do you feel about debt?
Let
And
it
the amount of the range of the responses I get really shows how they were raised. Sometimes I hear, oh, it doesn't bother me. Like, my parents weren't in any debt. I had a good childhood growing up, and I understand taking on some strategic debt, no problem.
Mhm.
Okay. Then I also hear, I grew up in a household where my parents could barely make it meet. We couldn't play sports. We were constantly figuring out where our next meal was coming from. There was credit card debt. And so I don't want any. Like that stresses me out because I don't want to replicate that. Now, those are probably your two extreme answers, right? A lot of times people are somewhere in the middle of, maybe I saw some of us struggling, but we were okay. But I really think the way that we were raised, what we saw or didn't see, the conversations we did or didn't have with mom and dad
Yeah.
is really tough, right? Because that shapes us into adults and what we then think. And don't even get me started on our educational system and the lack of education around personal finance. But, really your household was kind of your exposure. And I'm hopeful that the educational systems really start to change that over the years. But right now you come out of high school, college, grad school, whatever you do, and great, you're an expert in your career, but no one knows how to manage their money or what to do.
We could do an entire episode just on that because I feel like I have many discussions with my 13-year-old son about, in his words, the uselessness of the information he's being
Right.
taught.
Yeah.
There's no slap on our amazing teachers out there, but I feel like when we're talking about what are the most important things, probably like one's got to be health, two's got to be finances, three might be like relationships and communication, and none of these are being taught. It's like,
Right.
No
Yeah.
wonder we're on the struggle bus here.
Yeah.
Um, so I feel like before I knew you, before I knew better, I thought financial advisor. And like I said, it's like, okay, well, you go there to invest. Like, I think it's like, this is when you have this surplus of money. What am I going to do with this money? How do I invest? That's immediately kind of what I think. But you have also mentioned insurance and things like that, which I like. Tell us a bit more of, and again, everyone's going to be different, but like, what should we be thinking about in terms of insurance? What should we be considering?
Yeah. First, I just want everyone to know insurance is never fun, right? Like, I don't know anyone that loves paying their car insurance, their iPhone insurance, mortgage insurance, right? So I recognize that when I work with clients, but I think it comes back to, again, that foundation of the financial plan. And it's really just about the defense. Like if you're a sports fan, right, blocking and tackling, sometimes the best defense, you need that to go play offense and win a championship. And I think that when it comes to defense and a financial plan, we have to think through the things that aren't fun. Life insurance, for example, especially when kids are in the picture or if you have mortgages on the balance sheet. What happens if I don't come home tomorrow? Do I think that's going to happen to you? No. But what happens if that's the case? And so really we have to think through, okay, what do I want to see happen if I didn't come home tomorrow? And that's how we start to work backwards of how much insurance we need. Now, there's lots of different life insurances out there. Some are just that insurance. If I die, someone gets money. Not fun, but cheap.
Yeah.
And then others are, if I die, someone gets money. And while I'm alive, I can actually grow wealth inside of it. So now it's kind of an accumulation tool and an insurance tool. Which one's right? It depends. Also, insurance for protecting your paycheck. I mean, I try to help clients realize they're an ATM. Like, literally imagine if I dropped an ATM off at your place and I said, hey, as long as nothing happens to it, every day it's going to spit out, a couple $100, right? Whatever their paycheck equivalent is.
Yeah.
As long as nothing happens to it. But it's just sitting out here on the sidewalk, no worries. Would you want to protect that thing?
Yeah.
Everyone's always like, well, yeah, I'd probably put insurance on it. Right. Yes, I would too, because it's just spitting money out.
Yeah.
You are the ATM, right? Our ability to work physically, mentally, that is what allows us to earn a paycheck. And then that's what allows us to pay our rent or mortgage, save for retirement, send a kid to college, buy food, right? All of those basic things. But we don't think like, oh, it's never going to happen to me. And unfortunately, the statistic is 25% of people actually get, quote, disabled. And I do the quotes because it's a government term, but disabled means they're out of work for an extended period of time. Doesn't mean they die, but for an extended period of time, 25% of people are out of work. That's I don't know. That's a pretty big chance if you ask me. So, insurance, yeah, right. Like it's not fun. It's not, and I get that. But if you don't have your paycheck, like again, foundation of a plan, literally nothing else matters. How do you even save for retirement? Yeah. So we try to always, and that's one thing I think sometimes people in my industry don't talk about because it's not fun. Yeah. And it's not exciting. They just jump to the fun. I call it the sexy part of planning, right? The investing, all of that. But I think sometimes we just have to start at the basics, just like we do when we're raising a kid or, things like that. Keep it simple and then make sure that we have that strong defense to play a big offense, which is that investment in retirement.
Yeah, I love this. First of all, you're speaking my language with these metaphors. Like I find metaphors so helpful for me to be like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like it just kind of clicks in the mind. So the ATM one is really, really great. And that's really helpful. It almost feels like you have to have the hard conversations with people. But I think something that you do so well is that you make them not hard. You're like, this is not a big deal. We're just going to talk about this thing. It doesn't have to be weird. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. Like, it just is what it is. And this is actually smart. It's helpful. It's like putting that positive lens on it, which I think, anyway, that's how I feel when I talk to you. So I'm super grateful.
Well, good. That's the goal.
That's the goal, right?
Because I recognize it's not fun to think about dying.
Yeah, I know. Or having to spend money thinking that you might die. Like those things are not fun. Okay. So here's a question. Maybe, obvious, and again, I know this is going to depend, but let's say you have someone who maybe just doesn't, is just ready to invest a little. Like, is there a percentage where you're like, this is a good percentage to start with for a conservative person in thinking about how much of my paycheck I should be investing?
Yeah. So to back up even further, right? Investing is a piece of savings, and saving is a broad term of, there's a lot of different ways we can save money. A 401k is a piece of savings. An investment account or brokerage account is a piece of savings.
Yeah.
So when we're working with clients, we want, in a perfect world, we want to get them to at least 20% of their gross income being saved in some capacity. Now,
Right.
again, that might be deployed to different accounts, but
Yeah.
20%. But backing up even further, if someone's at 0%, I'm not taking them to 20% tomorrow, right? I'm saying,
Yeah.
hey, great job on reaching out. How do we get you to maybe 4 or 5% for the next year?
Yeah.
Because you're at 0 right now, right?
Yeah.
And obviously we have a, more nicer conversation about that. But I'm not like, you're at 0.
Yeah.
It's baby steps.
Yeah.
Because if you try to take someone from 0 to 20, they're not going to be able to do. First of all, it's not sustainable, and
Yeah.
second, they won't do it because they feel, again, human emotion. We feel like we're failing time after time, and naturally, humans avoid things that are hard for them.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we want to get you to at least 20%, ideally 25 to 30%, because that just means you get to either A, retire earlier, or B, spend more money in retirement the more you save. But if we're at 0, or even if we're at 5, we're just trying to take you. How do we get you to the next couple percent higher, maintain that, and then we'll sit back down next year and we'll go to 8% or 12%, right? That's the conversations we're having with clients.
Yeah. I love that. This has been so helpful. I already again, just hearing this, I think anyone listening is going to feel a little bit more calm. They're going to feel like, okay, there's an opportunity because as we talked about already, like time goes so fast. Like we were before we in our pre-discussion to this call, it was like, how is it the holiday season again?
Yeah.
And which is why I wanted to have this conversation now, because I feel like the holidays can bring its own level of stress and certainly financial stress. So, now I hope everybody listening can see yourself in one of these places to start and knows that they can absolutely reach out for help if they haven't already. Now you have someone to reach out to. But before I ask you where people can find and learn more from you, Christa, is there anything else you feel like women specifically should know about money or finances or this part of life that's so big?
Yeah, I think women specifically are scared to reach out and have these conversations. It is a scary thing, but and right before this, we were just talking about some people in my personal life who are going through changes. Relationships of 4+ years that have ended, and it's kind of that back to, oh goodness, like how do I handle this? How do I do X? How do I do Y? Or what does that look like financially? Right? All of that. So what I would just tell women is don't be scared, have the confidence to reach out and get help, because that's actually the most courageous thing that you can do is actually get help to build a plan for yourself in your future.
Yeah. And it's almost like even if you don't have the confidence, like that is part of what you provide, I think, as a financial advisor. It's like, let me help
Yep.
you build that confidence through, action. And that's really where confidence comes from, isn't it?
Yeah. And I would also like share, I think that is such a good point of an advisor should empower and should give you confidence. And by the way, they should not judge you.
Mm,
And so I think finding a financial advisor that's a good fit for you is so important because, like I always tell people, I'm not the right fit for everyone.
yeah.
And by the way, if I'm not the right fit for you, that's okay. You should go find someone who is. Or I've even given referrals to some of my colleagues who are like, hey, you know what? They might be a better fit for you. But I would encourage people that as they're reaching out, as they're having these conversations, make sure you feel comfortable to be vulnerable with someone and not judged by them. Because if you're putting up a facade about you, how you feel about your finances, or the information you do or choose to not disclose, then how is a financial advisor supposed to really create a personalized and meaningful plan for you? So I think the relationship piece is so important.
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, I see it in my land as well. It's like, I can't help you if you tell me you're eating things and you're not eating them, or you're not eating things and you are, like, or you're doing things. It's like, then it's just becomes a big waste of time and even money if you're investing in that. Right. So
Yep.
I love that. Finding someone that you feel like you can be vulnerable and open with is so important.
Mhm.
Christa, this has been amazing. I am so appreciative of your time and everything today. But where's the best place for someone if they want to reach out and learn more from you or talk to you specifically about this stuff? How do they do that?
Love it. we were joking before this that no one knows how to spell or say my last name. So I will attempt to give people a call to action here. But so the best way to reach me is going to be probably via email. First name, well, you can kind of see it on the screen, Christa, Chrisista, dot last name, Szalach, at N as in Nancy, M as in Mary.com. That's probably the best place. You can also, if you just Google my name, there's not many of me out there. So my website comes up. You can go there, explore, and see what we do. I'm also on LinkedIn and social media. Same thing. If you just search my name, you'll be able to find me. But email is usually the best, and just mention this podcast so I know how we were connected.
Yes, and I will put the actual correct spelling of the email and everything in the show notes. So for anyone listening who is ready to take that brave next step, or just get some help if you haven't already, make sure you swipe up and grab that link. And Christa, thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, sisters, now you have an amazing tool and some great tips for being more in your life and not just less on a scale. And we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Period Whisperer podcast. If you liked this episode, take 30 seconds right now to write a review on iTunes, and then reach out to me directly on Instagram at Bria_period_whisperer and message me there with a screenshot of your review. As a thank you, I will give you a customized free hormone audit to get you on your way to the best health of your life in midlife.